Hi there. Yeah, I also got into this with Liquid Democracy a little bit back before Ethereum. We used to call it e-democracy, was like what a lot of the forums were called. Yeah, it's electronic democracy. I was like making Node.js modules,
Let's
swapping
make a
voting
track.
algorithms.
Let's make a Liquid Democracy track next
Oh, yeah,
time.
yeah.
That would be amazing.
Cool. Hi there. So yeah, do you want to kick us off?
Maybe we can get started. Nice to meet you, Dan.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, my name's Jeff. I work on Flow Foundation. I'm a little less known than yourself. Maybe you don't need an introduction to something like this.
Depends on the circle, I'm sure.
That's right. Yeah, I'm running a product for wallets on Flow, currently managing Flow Wallet, which is our flagship wallet provider that makes use of all the unique product opportunities for wallets on the Flow blockchain. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm Dan Finlay. I work on the MetaMask wallet, which allows you to do similar on the Ethereum blockchain. And I actually just learned when I met you yesterday, and we were preparing for this. And I don't usually, you know, like a panel with someone I've never met. I don't know. I was like feeling a little ambivalent. Then I looked up. I learned that you in the Flow blockchain, you actually have something similar to the authorization abstraction concept that I just introduced. So that was one thing that made me excited about this. And then the second one was that you gave me a story. You shared a story, and I think you ought to share it here. Of how you know how they say you either die a hero or become the reason someone else got into crypto. Yeah, I may be the reason that Jeff here got into crypto by being the walled garden. Go ahead, tell the story.
It's a bit of a silly story, but yeah, I had a feeling we'd be talking about delegation framework and capabilities on Flow, but yeah, I mean, my story starts with working on CryptoKitties back at Dapper Labs, and we had this problem we were facing back in the day where we had developed our own wallet at Dapper called Dapper Wallet Ethereum at the time. And CryptoKitties supported MetaMask as a primary wallet connection provider. And we wanted to have a way for users to either connect with Dapper Wallet Ethereum or MetaMask. And of course, this was before we had wallet abstraction frameworks and EIPs, you know, people thinking about this sort of concept, because at the time, everybody was using MetaMask. And so I opened a PR, of course, to MetaMask and introduced a very simple but a bit pernicious suggestion around how we could change how the Ethereum provider was set to the window variable by MetaMask. And I said, well, what if we just set MetaMask's provider to window.metamask, and of course everybody tries to set to window.ethereum already, but kind of scoping those the providers to some sort of a name on window. And the first comment was from Dan, who unfortunately had differing thoughts on the PR.
Well, when you told me the story yesterday, I immediately said, that sounds like it'll pollute the global namespace. And he said, that's exactly what you said 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And let me just, I'll give you just a slight insight onto why that matters to me. And it's because like to this day, there's a little list in MetaMask that we have to hard maintain, where it's like the sites we do not inject the provider on, because those sites break because they do something weird. Either they respond to post message with like any flag, or they enumerate the keys in the global namespace and they break, or whatever. And so every time you touch the global namespace, you are just like tempting, like breaking stuff. So it definitely wasn't, it was never like an ideological, like, well, what's the worst situation is what we ended up with is like now wallets clobber each other, or like some wallets like wrap the other one and then pop up a banner ad when you try to interact with it and stuff like that. We eventually settled on a nice EIP for like providing an array of wallets so you can have multi-wallet environments. But yeah, I think this was more just like we needed to explore the solution space a little further. And for me, like it just wasn't a priority yet. Like we were in like scramble our butts off because like we just had an explosion of usage, and so we were like trying to handle users that were having like hard problems at that moment. If we had just come up with that EIP for like basically add an array of wallets to the provider, I think we probably would have settled it right there.
But I think, fortunately, since you did have other opinions than myself in the PR, it sent me down the rabbit hole, which eventually ended up in a career in Web3, right? thinking through all the different ways in which we could solve that uniquely on Flow.
It's basically Vitalik's story about the World of Warcraft sword or whatever that he had that got nerfed. So I nerfed his sword inadvertently. And sometimes the nerfing can be it's you don't mean harm. Permissionlessness isn't just about breaking down boundaries that are deliberately put up. It's about like making sure that we like have a maximal space to like collaborate and just innovate freely without like running into these like hard kind of arbitrary boundaries that. Yeah, so anyways, collaborative software is something that means a lot to me. Should we talk a little bit about our views of like what should it mean to make a more collaborative wallet, like a wallet that lets people express themselves more freely?
Surely.
I haven't explored the Flow blockchain very much, and I'm not trying to plug it. And I probably, out of concern for my performance, should have bought some right before the panel. But but tell you what, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the experience is like today?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things that wallets can do is support the ecosystem of applications being built on the blockchain, right? And so one of the things we do in Flow Wallet, and we try to encourage around the other wallet providers in the ecosystem as well, is help direct traffic, users, liquidity, action to the ecosystem of applications. And so, the dApp Explorer within Flow Wallet is a great example of that. Of course, there's equivalents in many other wallet providers as well, but I think being open to helping, drive engagement and usage towards those third-party applications is kind of what we're all about at the end of the day, right? It's all about the ecosystem, and so supporting them within the wallet.
Yeah. So I've obviously like been very very slow to like take on what I would see as like the heavy responsibility burden of maintaining a curated list of dApps, and it's not for lack of having things that I would recommend, but it's I guess there's like a dual thing. There's like apprehension about being a gatekeeper, or I think that sometimes people say like fear of being kingmaker, and that actually is sometimes a real concern. Like if there's like two dexes or something, and you want to give one the props or whatever, they're gonna the other one's gonna feel really salty when you put the other one below. I guess you guys are doing a lot of more like cultural partnerships where you can kind of like cycle them through, right? You're doing like Disney and NBA type stuff, so you're just like, hey, here's the hot brands that are exciting to look at or something. How do you think about that, and especially how do you think about like continuing to foster a developer community when you're like taking such a kind of strong stance at promoting these like major players?
Well, I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive, right? It's not all big brands or smaller IPs or more indie projects. I think we can have everything. To your point on like, are we king-making or not within the wallet? I think as long as there are open mechanisms where community can start to work towards how do we display a ranked list of applications, for example. But I don't think it has to be so mutually exclusive. I don't think there's scarcity in users. Hopefully, if we do everything right in this industry or and whatnot. So I wouldn't say we have to operate within that scarcity mindset.
I would definitely say that user attention is scarce. So just to reinforce the like preciousness of it or whatever. But yeah, I'm totally interested in more like community-oriented curation mechanisms and stuff. And I just gave a presentation on this like delegation framework where you're making it MetaMask, where anything you can do, you can share. I think there's a big opportunity even in the curation space where something that is normally centrally curated in some way can share its curatorial skills. Now that's more of it's kind of a Boolean thing. It's like either in the list or out of the list. When you get into ranking things, it becomes a little more squishy number. And I think that's where things like verifiable credentials and claims that get like computed by some kind of algorithm that's off chain, like Eigentrust is like Karma 3 from Karma 3 Labs is a good example of like an open framework for kind of playing with ranking algorithms. So there's probably some opportunity to build like some community curating powers that you then like start to weave into a list like that. I think that would be really interesting to me, just to make sure that like the community is feeding into such a list. Versus like, I don't know, you guys, do you either like employ an army of curators, or do you just like have like some good internal systems for like, if an employee wants to recommend something, like give it the bump, and no pumping your own projects, or like, like, because that'd be the really scary thing, right? Like you get like one rogue employee that like starts rugging, one person with access to the Twitter account who like repeatedly rugs your employees. Like, not like I've ever heard of any wallets doing that, but like, wouldn't that be terrible? I would be really afraid of enabling that kind of thing. Like, how do you guys think about those kinds of safety mechanisms?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to community engagement and participation. I mean, one of the best things about open source is that our code is open and our sins can be viewed by anybody if we commit them. And so, yeah, I do encourage people to take a look at, how we are building these mechanisms. And if they want to come up with a better way of curating applications within Flow Wallet, please open a PR, right? But I'm not going to pretend like we've solved this problem on application curation. I think if we do, that's going to be something monumental for the entire industry, which would be great as well.
If the list is maintained on GitHub, then GitHub is your governance module, and then we're like, well, maybe we should be building voting systems on GitHub or something, right? But I think that's also a good argument for like moving portions of our data on chain, because it's like those parts where it's like we'd like to make that part more community governed. And yeah, so it's interesting that pursuit of like which part of my product is like our opinions that we're like standing behind 100%, which parts are we're like, oh, you know what, this is like this is an ecosystem garden, and we want to crack this wall open, and that's kind of where these tools of collaboration start to be fun to weave in. I would hope.
No, totally. I mean, it's up to the community, right? If you want to change something about Flow Wallet, open an issue, make a PR, and the same thing I think goes for the majority of the rest of the Web3 ecosystem as well.
Yeah, you don't get spammed with PRs, I would think, if you have to review everyone.
If I get spammed with PRs, I've done something very, very good.
Okay. Oh, you're looking forward to that day. Oh, so
I rejoice the day that I
you
get
may
to
be
that
at other sides of an adoption curve here.
I think we are.
Okay.
I think you're dealing with problems that I would find luxurious to deal with myself
yeah,
at this point.
It's not luxurious once you're in it. This may be like early advantage. I remember long before I ever was in a startup, I had like an inkling, like even though me and my friends are dirt poor, like we're a small scrappy ship and we move fast, and the big guys at those corporations, they move so slow, and they have to, and like at MetaMask we're not a big corporation, but we're in crypto we're big, and you already feel it. You're like, oh yeah, once you have like a lot of, and it's as simple as having more users. You're like, oh, a change that breaks something for 0.5% of users is fine when you have 100 people and you have to answer one email. And then if it's a few million, you're like, okay, is our support staff ready? We're going to roll out a kind of risky update or whatever, like, because response, now hopefully AIs will make like deduplication better. So you're like, signal reduced to one action item, get it done or whatever. But yeah, anyways, yeah, interesting to see
No, but it's kind of a segue into like, why did we decide to build Flow after having built CryptoKitties on Ethereum, right? It's like, we were obsessed at Dapper Labs about creating consumer products in Web3. And to do so in the Ethereum world would take a lot of time, right? You have to reach consensus around different changes and EIPs and collaboration. And that's great and good and wonderful. But when we want to build these consumer products for brands like the NBA or Disney or Ticketmaster and others, we had to go back and kind of build fast and start to think about how can we solve for these primitives, how can we build the things we want within the Ethereum community and others now, like today, right? How can we get to account abstraction today? How can we get to a better transaction model, a better programming model today? And it's one of the reasons why we sat down after building CryptoKitties and said, okay, what would we have loved to have had in the Ethereum world when we were building these consumer products? And we took all those, wishful thoughts and thinkings, and we built those into Flow from the ground up. And I think it's sometimes to eject from an ecosystem and kind of try to create your own is difficult, right? But in doing so, you can kind of leapfrog ahead and in towards progress on some of those things as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that experience that you had is probably very prescriptive, not only for the Ethereum ecosystem, but for any blockchain that claims to be like Turing complete. Like the whole notion of an open-ended blockchain is in theory that people that are building on it can kind of, they're unblocked. So you're right, you're not just making tokens, you're making whatever you want or whatever. So little things like, okay, account abstraction, Ethereum community, figure that also. I'm curious about how the time frame compared, so maybe you're able to give yourself that a little sooner. I'm curious, are there other things today, I'm giving you a nice big opening, I guess, that you feel are still like, you just can't do that on Ethereum? And then I'll try to come up with how you could maybe.
Well, maybe I'll talk about something. Maybe I'll talk about a thing that we're thinking kind of along the same lines of, right?
Sure.
And of course, you're here talking about delegation framework, which you've been working on, which I think is wonderful. And on Flow, we have a very similar concept called capabilities, right? The ability for a developer to program this. It's a capability. The ability for some other person or smart contract or user to take actions upon either the user's account or some assets they contain. So for example, I could create like a capability that allows Alice to take 100 flow out of my account, right? And I can give that capability to her, and she can invoke it and use it when she wants to do so.
And you can have like expected outcomes like after hooks.
Post conditions, preconditions, and everything.
I saw that in your docs. So very very similar to our delegation.
Very similar, yeah,
so,
yeah.
So like, and I do think there are like some fundamentally like correct things about that. Are they counterfactual by any chance?
I can't. I don't want to say that live in front of a recording.
Okay,
but
so here's my question: does granting a permission require a transaction with a fee and a block time?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right. I bet you have an opportunity for an optimization there.
Okay, let's chat.
One of the cool things I think we brought to the MetaMask delegation framework is every approval or authorization can be off-chain. I actually think here's a mental model for how I think of it is that look, information was always free to copy. So like expanding access is actually as free as copying data. And that applies to data of all kinds. And data can imbue powers, right? Data can be your credit card number. But contracting digital access, that's where we were like, oh, wait, what? And you can't make a currency on digital systems because you can't remove data. And that was actually the core innovation of the blockchain. It was a way to retract access in a way that's like publicly verifiable. And so you can actually map that same property back onto blockchain. Blockchain's made it so good at making sure that everything is like, you can take that back, that could be taken back, that we're applying it to even things where you're actually expanding access. And so in any scenario where you're actually expanding access, I posit it can be off-chain first. It could be represented as a contract or a signature that's not on-chain yet and is only put on-chain in the case where it's disputed or has to have its policies enforced. So that's a way that I'm thinking about it. Maybe on Flow you don't need it. I know you have a very fast consensus algorithm, but I bet even the fastest consensus algorithm, being a single-threaded machine, will eventually benefit from minimizing its operations in a successful enough environment or whatever.
I'm sure the team at Flow will do a lot of thinking based off of what you just said to me here. So
Sure.
I'll take that home and we'll think about it. But I guess in terms of things like the delegation framework and capabilities, something I'm thinking about quite a bit is how can we surface these things within wallets, right? And where does the wallet play a role in helping either promote their usage throughout the ecosystem or help the user gain benefit from them? For example, with Flow Wallet and capabilities, one of the goals with Flow Wallet, as I said earlier, is to exemplify these product opportunities unique for wallets on Flow. Capabilities is a unique concept to Flow and specifically how we've done it. And one of the things I want to do with Flow Wallet is create a way for users to manage their capabilities that they've granted. Similar, like on iPhone, if you go into your settings and you scroll down to whatever app, you can toggle on whether or not that app has access to your camera or your contacts. You should be able to do the same with the capabilities you've granted on Flow, right? Let's say, if I don't want Alice to have that capability to take 100 flow out of my account anymore, I should be able to revoke that, for example. So I guess, what are some of the ways you're thinking of integrating delegation framework within MetaMask, and do you think MetaMask plays a role within that within the ecosystem?
Yeah, 100% same that thing. So like any outstanding permission, you should be able to revoke. And I actually feel pretty bad that we've been so slow to bring revocations right into the wallet for tokens. I think there's actually something inherent to the way that authorization is done in Ethereum today that is actually wrong, which is authorizations are always coming from the contract. And so the user doesn't actually have perfect visibility into all authorizations they've made. So for example, if you make a new kind of contract with some new kind of authorization, a wallet may not recognize that it even gave one. And so token revocations, no excuse. But as we get into the space of like more and more advanced types of policies that could be granted, I think you can only maintain that perfect visibility of what the users like agreed to when those agreements are always readably issued from the wallet itself. And so it does sound like Flow Blockchain is like building those capabilities at the per account level, right? So you're not expecting contract developers to implement all of their delegation functionality themselves, right? That's like a feature of the Move language or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, right? Like the idea is a capability can grant access to assets or functionality on things that you have in your account. So for example, if I have we have a concept called resources on Flow, and resources can have functions that are defined within them, and I can grant you a capability that allows you to access that function within my resource, right? And so maybe to give you a concrete example, like let's say I have a notion around like a profile, right? Like my identity that is codified as like a resource that lives in my account. And there's like a set name function, right? That allows somebody to set the name. I could grant you a capability to that set name function such that you can invoke it to set the name of my account, for example. Or I could give that to a contract or any other sort of, I could give that to a resource, I could give that to anything else on Flow.
Yeah, and actually that speaks to like one of the gotchas I kind of shared on the delegation framework. There's an aspect of it that was harder to build on Ethereum because resources on Ethereum are not, it's not like a unit that's like exposed to the virtual machine layer. So when you want to grant a permission to a resource using our delegation framework, you actually have to you have to craft these caveat enforcers. And we have these ones that are basically primitives, which basically define a resource, where it's basically saying only that address, only this function. And so we're kind of writing a definition for the resource at the user account level, which is like, it was, I think, a little weird that we had to kind of tack that on. And it wasn't like kind of, the chain is not really written in a way where the units of authority are like a base property. You kind of have to compose them on top. Now, I would argue we managed to compose it, but it wasn't like, the platform certainly didn't nudge us in that direction. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that like nobody built this yet. Like, and it was difficult. It was a heavy lift for us to build this on top of Ethereum. Now I'm thrilled that we did. And I hope that people get that, because like thinking in terms of the resources that you have available, I think, when you want to show that panel of permissions you have outstanding, they need to be divided in some kind of comprehensible unit, right? And that's like, when we talk about object capability security, I think the word object is kind of talking about this like platonic ideal of like, it's like, at what level do you give a crap, right? Like, and Griff was giving an example like on a DAO vote, right? Like at the base level, your DAO vote might be the unit of authority you care about, but you might break it up into topics, and you might share the ability to vote on a topic. And that might just be because you're a little bit of a quant, you're really into the nuances of this, and there's somebody who's even, cares about even more specific things, and they're like trading on the futures of possible votes or something like that, and they might care about some other granularity. And so I think I'm talking myself into like, I think it's also nice to have user-defined boundaries for those resources. So while on the one hand, it is really cool for Flow contracts to define these resources at base time, I bet you sometimes users will kind of want to, do you have a concept yet of a virtual resource, like a user derives a resource from another? I mean, of course you could wrap one, so I guess you could compose it in that way at least. But yeah, like where do you break things up? There's a great paper by Ka-Ping Yi called Principles of User Interface Design, and he outlines like 10 principles that he thinks like an ideal user interface has, and one of them is this principle of appropriate boundaries, and it's like exactly that. It's like when you're granting approvals or you're bothering people with permissions, do they get what they're even agreeing to? And like I'll just, punching up is always cool. So like Apple on Mac OS, oh my God, like you'll install an app, it'll say, this application wants access to your documents folder. And I'm like, are you kidding? My whole documents folder? Like, so all the documents? Like, I only want to, what do you want to do with like a text editor? I want to occasionally open a document. I want to occasionally save a document, and can we leave the rest out of it? By the way, the guy who invented the file picker, Mark Miller, it's called Miller columns. When you pick a folder and then it goes in and you pick another, that's called Miller columns, named after Mark Miller. He designed that user interface to be an authorization mechanism. So it's like, to me, comical beyond pale that then Apple takes that pattern and then slaps like a access to documents thing, and you're like, so, because the user's picking the file. You have the information at the operating system level, but they're for some reason not thinking at these units of authorization quite where they could.
I think the granularity of those permissions is extremely important, and also surfacing that in a human readable way. Like, I think the greatest sin we could commit is if we come up with this great, these great technical concepts around capabilities or whatnot, and the user can't, figure out what they mean, right? If they can't read them at the time of either authorization of them or when they're going to manage them as well. So figuring out how to translate that into a human readable format is quite difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell like the horror story. The horror story that OpenSea went through, is they used ERC 1155. So first of all, huge danger, because now every authorization is for all of your NFTs in that collection. And then also for their bids, they crafted their approval signature. Right. So again, this theme of, are you implementing your own approval scheme? huge red flag. Okay, they implemented their own approval mechanism for placing offers for your NFTs, and the method of signature they requested was the personal sign method, which if you're familiar with Ethereum wallets, it's human readable. It uses plain text, but they chose not to pass it human readable text. They would give it a hash of the offer you were making, which means from now on, if you ever granted an allowance to OpenSea's Wyvern 1.3 contracts, which they've migrated off these, but if back in the day, if you were an OG OpenSea user, you might have an outstanding allowance to this thing, which means from now on, anytime you sign an unreadable thing, someone could be taking all your NFTs of that sort. That's like how Seth Green lost his Bored Ape, like right before the premiere of his show based on it. That's a total, a really horrendous event, and I think it comes deeply from the fact that we didn't have readable authorization kind of baked into the platform as like a core primitive. And so for me, delegation framework is very much by bringing that authorization type logic back over into the wallet's hands, where it's always readable first. I think we're establishing a baseline foundation for ensuring that you can always read and understand the risk you're taking and assign them the level of granularity you intend.
Yeah, something that frustrates me to no end is how much I think, honestly, as an industry, we have to look at ourselves and say, are we successful in how we've done transaction authorization, right? Like, I'll ask you a question, like, when you sign a transaction in any wallet provider, how confident are you that that thing is going to be safe or do what you think it's going to do?
Oh, I'm not a terrible degen, and I'm careful because I know how risky these things are.
Right, but right?
But also, but here's the other thing that most people I don't think understand about Ethereum is if you're interacting with a new contract and you're confident it's a new contract, you have pretty good assumptions that interacting with it, a contract can only manage the authority it has. So and I think we've inadequately surfaced this. Like it's a mental model that didn't quite click. We started trying to surface it a little more by just address booking contracts better, making it clear this is your first time, et cetera. But yeah, the fact that some people have so little mental model around precisely which interactions are safe or not, they end up basically treating I've heard it where like I know some people basically treat the MetaMask confirmation as a YOLO. I think we've improved a lot, but like for a while it was a YOLO. You go to a site, if it's a token allowance, at least it's that. But like if it's a transaction, you're like, do I trust this site or whatever? And that's obviously unacceptable. And I think the worst state is when you've established that mentality and people are already treating it that way. That I guess if they're willing to YOLO, then they're going to use the things they're going to, and if you add safety, it's only bringing.
They're just going to click through regardless. Yeah.
But I have a feeling that means that they also become repelled or afraid of things that otherwise could be safe in the future.
Totally. And then how do we onboard people that don't necessarily know what to look for, right? Like consumers, right? Like on Flow, we're positioning ourselves as the consumer blockchain, trying to onboard the masses, right? And when a user clicks through, even in Flow Wallet, and they don't see a human readable explanation of what that transaction is doing, they just see a bunch of complex code or a function invocation, things like gas fees, all this stuff. How are they supposed to protect themselves? How is a regular person supposed to protect themselves against, a malicious actor or malicious application?
Yeah. In a way, I think that we tried to userify the platform prematurely. Like it's like Ethereum was like enough to build anything, and then we're like, okay, well, here's enough to use it, right? And then people are like, and now we will bring the consumers. And it's like, well, this is like how to use it like at the base layer, like you're playing gas and like literally gas abstraction. It was buildable, but it was simply not what anyone wanted to build. Everyone wanted to go straight for consumer. And it was just, a recurring theme. We're perennially in it's time to stop building infrastructure and build for the consumer phase, like perennially. And everybody constantly thinks now we're entering it. And don't get me wrong, now we're entering it. But thanks to the MetaMask delegation framework and your great work at Flow, no doubt. The point being, like, these were some of the primitives that kind of needed to be in place. And so it's scary and terrifying that we passed through that era. But I think I'm excited that we have these strong mental models now. I really think we're building dramatically solider foundations. I can't wait to see what gets built with it.
I want to give a shout out to Blockade as well, which was recently integrated with MetaMask Wallet. I'm a big fan of the Blockade product. I think they're doing tremendous work towards making transactions safer for regular people, and I think that was a great integration that you guys did.
They're completely amazing superlative simulation team, and they also do a really great job of like detecting malicious sites around the web. They do some really incredible work on that. It's all secret sauce. They're excellent magicians.
They're total wizards. I love them.
fraud
Yeah.
detection. Yeah, absolutely. We need more wizards of fraud detection out there. Throw in the flags that everyone can see to keep us all safer.
I guess another question for you would be, within MetaMask, and I guess even beyond, MetaMask, all wallets, what other ecosystem primitives do you wish wallet providers would integrate? What other sort of, thinking beyond just transaction authorization and authentication and maybe even resource management, what other primitives you see being created on the blockchains that you think wallets should play a greater role in managing, manipulating, or participating in?
Well, I think that when you're building on a totally permissionlessly extensible foundation, that actually exposing an interface to it, the rigidity of the interface you use to view it defines the rigidity of the underlying platform. So that's why I believe that like the wallet itself has to be as flexible and dynamic as the underlying thing. I strongly believe that the ideal wallet has to be as permissionlessly extensible as the underlying blockchain. And I think that permissionless computing in general is something we just don't actually have access to today. And I think it's almost another example of cart before the horse, that we're trying to build a safe distributed computer before we have safe individual computers, right? So we haven't even solved selecting, running a text app without giving it access to your whole documents folder, but we're trying to like place complex derivative trades on a new L2 that we learned about yesterday. So in some ways, I think that the financial severity of the blockchain environment has forced people like us to start learning like the fundamentals of computer security that the people building mainstream computers aren't. And I think that we're going to kind of bubble these things out. But all that, the first bubble out for the MetaMask group, that was our Snaps project. So we have a plugin system, and we've spent years building out a secure sandbox that allows you to build dynamic extensions to the wallet. And it's going to be a long road for making it as seamless and dynamic as it deserves to be. But for us, so one example, obviously is having additional blockchains, because for me, a blockchain isn't just about like, oh, are we on the new hot L1? It's as simple as like, well, if we start a little summer camp, can we like play with tokens easily with this wallet? Because we ought to be able to. We should be able to have community currencies with whatever level of security we want, and we just don't all need global consensus. And so wallets that have like a default set of, L1s that all require buy-in to participate in kind of puts like this artificial barrier at collaboration. You're like, no, how dare you think you can run your own micro consensus organization? You buy from one of our token holder daddies first. And so for me, so Snaps, letting you add not just like chains that we know about, but other chains and potentially chains that have interfaces we don't even know about. That's been a stellar challenge, but I think one worth taking on because it'll let us expand not just to new L1s of the types we know, but to new weirdo L1s. So I really hope that Snaps becomes the place where people with the craziest, most ambitious new L1s get into a wallet first, because it's just the lowest barrier to entry, and then they can get validated. And then another example is in the types of accounts, because like we're all used to having individual accounts, but we're also sometimes delegates on a DAO or something. And in my opinion, currently the experience of proposing an on-chain transaction as a member of a DAO is horrible. Like, what are you going to copy call data, and then you're going to go paste that into the simulation site, and all that. When like we're over here building the stack for readable authorizations, right? So yeah, of course you should be able to put your multisig or your DAO into your wallet and grant and issue proposals or votes as easily as you can browse Web3 and like initiate any other operation. So that's something. Yeah, like DAOs in MetaMask is definitely one of those things where like I think we only just in the last few months shipped our like 4337 account support in Flask. So like. But we're getting there where you should be able to basically just plug in any old account, and I think that will be a lot of fun. And so I'm just expressing, your question was something like what are responsibilities does a wallet have besides asset management and such? I guess what my answer is I think a wallet for permissionless substrate should also explore the spaces where it needs to be expansible to sufficiently enable the kinds of things that it wants to see.
Totally. I think turning MetaMask into a developer platform was a very smart idea, right? Allowing people to inject their additional functionality, kind of composing directly with MetaMask itself is is very, very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a lot of work, and yeah, the team working hard, and we've got some incredible collaborators. Like I think some of the best money getting spent in Web3 is our grants to our object capabilities sponsors like Agoric and Sprightly. I think they're gonna like low key write the foundations for a more secure web in a few ways. So I encourage people to check those out and try using their tools, because I think that they're going to be superpowers for those who learn to wield them.
So one of the things you just said was like assuming you're building on a permissionless substrate. And how do you feel about like more permissioned environments for creating safety for wallets?
Sorry. Permissioning something is something that you can do in a permissionless environment, right?
Exactly.
So plugging it, like I said, like Summer Camp Coin, I think that is a pretty good example, right? Or I should be able to have a house coin. You know, we manage our chores. Or okay, maybe they won't all trust me, but we can have 3 Raspberry Pis in the in the shared house, right? And agree on chore allocation or something. And so so no matter how permissioned it is, even if it's and I know you're a fan, and I met some people through you who what is it, not Dfinity, Holochain is doing they're doing a blockchain-esque thing, but like you literally, like if you make a token, it's really just validated by yourself, and so it's like implied. And I think there's an elegance to it. It's like, if this is your personal token, who else's validation do you need? Like you always had the ability to burn them and rug people and all that stuff. So there's like a whole category of like minimal consensus for certain kinds of contracts when the authorization of that contract is like well defined. Permissioned too.
Well, yeah, and I'm really exploring this idea of creating a space where you can't use any application with your wallet. You know, instead of needing blockade to validate transactions, instead you effectively whitelist contracts that, as a user using this wallet in this context, you could only access certain applications.
Oh yeah.
You know?
So like as a parent, you know, I might want to give my daughter a spending allowance that she can only use on decent stuff. And
or even as a brand, I'm going to onboard these people. I'm going to onboard people to this simple wallet, but I'm only going to let them use these applications with this interface. Because I kind of see like, okay, you have smart contracts, and in those smart contracts, you have 1 million functions, and you can do anything with those functions, right? But the DApp only exposes so many functions to you as a user. And then if we went a level higher, where it's like, okay, now as a wallet, I'm only going to let you have access to so many applications.
It's an interesting thought. Like there is such a thing as, because I had a family friend recently who'd suffered some brain damage, and they were like particularly prone to scams and things, and they were having a relapse into alcoholism, like for example. So there's sometimes at a certain point, family members will be put in custody of a person like that's funds, and they're responsible for trying to help make sure that they can navigate the world safely. So this is a case of a person who effectively can't trust themselves. And I know this is probably a really scary kind of topic for crypto, where we're all about like user custodial keys and stuff. But like sometimes the best thing for you is to like fully trust somebody else like to care for you. So in a context like that, So I gave the example of how the authorization could be constraining. So that's similar to how these credit cards, you can get one, you can't use it on liquor at the liquor store, but you can get food kind of thing. I think food stamps work similarly. So you could issue delegations like that, but you're bubbling up to the wallet layer. Like, should there be special wallet products perhaps that like even also apply these? I think the way that you could kind of have it today, like if we had a version of MetaMask that literally didn't have anything except for like the assets that it had received via delegations or something. So it's like strip out everything except for basically snaps, and you preload it with the ability, you get an invite link that installs it, and that's the thing you have. Like, yes, they'd still be able to acquire other crypto, but like everything they would have afforded to them by the person who sent them their first crypto would be inherently confined to those approved things. So that's maybe a place where you would have a balance between the two. I don't know if you can get somebody to install some software that doesn't let them do anything. They could always still just install another wallet that does. So I'd say that there's kind of an inherent property to like they can still get power from other places, but yeah, you can always like constrain power that you're granting.
Thank you guys so much. There's a lot of talk about decentralized social and the promise to be able to own the content you create, as well as the followers that you amass and the interoperability between assets. My question is, how do you think wallets are going to evolve? What is their purpose going to be in 5 years from now? And do you think the assets that we currently think about are going to change? Like, what kind of assets might a wallet actually manage and help you store and have access to?
I mean, you get into decentralized social, you start talking about assets that are like extremely off-chain, like likes, replies, profile changes, maybe your history, or maybe every little, the ability to update your bio. Right? We're kind of getting back to that, what I call the principle of appropriate boundaries. Like, what are the units of that experience that are meaningful? And through something like the delegation framework, all of those things can be counterfactual assets. And I think the delegation framework is a great fit for decentralized social, because they're trying to say, what can we keep off chain in general? But then what you get is protocols like, say, Farcaster, where they basically rolled their own crypto. It's all based on JSON LD, and so none of the authorizations or the social graph is really judiciable on the blockchain. So today, Farcaster lets you recover an account via an Ethereum signature. So you can give your account to like an Ethereum account, and it can like authorize multiple posters, and it can like recover your account. But none of the social graph itself is like easily, I don't think practically, theoretically it is, but nobody's done it, and probably no one's going to bother making it so you can interpret that graph in a way that like has actual on-chain influence. So I think things like ensuring that. So one way that I guess I just noticed is if you made a decentralized social thing where things were anchored in a way where they're interpretable back onto a blockchain, you'd probably make higher authority things possible from that social graph in terms of blockchain influence. But then you also ask a whole bunch of other things that maybe I'll just pass it to Jeff if anything is struck a nerve for him.
Well, one of the questions I posed to you was, what other sort of ecosystem primitives would wallets have to play a role in managing into the future? And I think, today most wallets support managing things like your fungible tokens, your non-fungible tokens. But as these additional ecosystem primitives gain traction, gain users, gain prevalence, maybe there's a future where wallets play a greater role in being the front end into these platforms, into these protocols. And maybe that takes the form as a MetaMask Snap, for example, which a third-party developer could create and sideload into MetaMask. Or maybe it takes the product itself to take a deeper look at, how could I visualize, how could I tap into these existing primitives?
Oh, right. So then tying that back to something he asked, he says, well, what does the wallet have in it in 10 years, if you've got like likes and all these like other tiny things. So for one thing, if you imagine that we get that numerous and stuff, it starts looking less like a list of your portfolio. It starts looking a little bit more like so many things. Like, I don't even think password manager is the right metaphor, because there's like nested things. It's like maybe more of a file system.
Little mini apps almost within the wallet, right? That you're visualizing.
Well, I was first just thinking about just the library of things you might have that you could authorize. Because, while some of these things are going to be like DApp requested, sometimes you just want to share something with someone. So like, I do think that like the interpersonal aspect, like you should be able to delegate directly from your wallet. Say like, hey, send that to someone. Generate an interface for just using that or something, and then they would have that. So in that case, and one of the first memes I ever saw about MetaMask that felt like it was like informative, where it was like, yeah, that is kind of what we are. It's like it was a screenshot from Zelda, and they're like MetaMask is my Zelda inventory for the Web3, and it was like, oh yeah, your inventory. That's a cool way to. I feel like that was a positive nudge in the right framework. And so if it's an inventory and you're connecting to dApps, like so our Snap system will let you make like custom UIs. Like you select an asset, you can have a custom UI in it. So that's going to be like possible. I'm curious if people are going to want to like go into their wallet to interact with it. Like maybe mini apps on the assets maybe that's a great framework. Or maybe the websites that you can like log into is going to continue to have a richer experience because it's got like WebGL and lower level. Connecting to your Xbox, you're not going to do that within your phone, right? So like, so I think the minimum viable wallet is probably more about just connecting two things, connecting them together. There's some super app hypothetical that I'm sure lots of people are probably drooling over the prospect of, right? The WeChat of Web3 or something. Whether that catches, making mini apps. But yeah, are you going to make better mini apps? Then you'll make connectable apps. I don't know. I tend to think that like my model of an extensible permissionless software world looks more like applications as peers than it looks like just like growing a tree and becoming the deeper root for it. It's like you're going to load your app, you're going to load your operating system, to load your browser, to load your extension, to load the extensions. You know, like a little tower of extensions feels like a much worse experience than just like, here are the things I care about and I just move between them. So maybe that's what the operating system is. And, you know, I actually have said, and I think it's objectively accurate to say that Snaps turned MetaMask into an operating system. An operating system is basically a computing system that lets you extend and run code on it. It's just like a janky micro operating system. But the reason we had to become an operating system is because we needed the properties of one. We needed to be extensible like the blockchain we were connecting to. So either the base operating systems we use are going to learn how to be as permissionless as the platforms we're trying to use because they enable the kinds of coordination that we care about, or Web3 stuff is going to bubble down and we're going to eventually eat the operating system level or something. And I hope they do that. That'd be fun, I guess. I don't know. But I also kind of hope they get it together so I can do something else, you know. So we'll see, right? And eventually that should bubble down to hardware too. And it's not like nobody at the hardware level is thinking about these security. There's actually, at Intel, there's a project called Cheri, CHERI, where they're trying to build a capability system at the opcode level. They like provide a special opcode for basically defining resources. So then this becomes available. You can slap it. You can basically do a compile of Linux that uses Cheri, where you define certain things as resources, and applications cannot access those without an explicit authorization. And then, you know, there's I'll also shout out to SEL4, the first formally verified operating system, which is also based on capability theory. And it's a microkernel. It's in the true sense, in the sense of the original KeyCOS microkernel. The worst thing that Steve Jobs ever did was brand the Mach kernel as a microkernel because he erased an incredibly valuable field of computer science that needed to have a day. There's a theory. There's a hot take. Okay, so shout out. So my point is that there are already people at the hardware and the microcontroller, and even Google is funding the Fuchsia operating system to be their new Android thing. So far it's available as a developer kit for Google Home devices, but it's not Linux. It is a new kind of thing, and it renders using their Flutter library. So many Android apps, like their UI layer, can port, but then the system hooks are all these capabilities where you like request granular resources and stuff. So I think that these ideas of the appropriate boundaries of authorization, they are finally coming to fruition. Something around 60 years before after they were originally theorized. I'm stoked to have two different blockchains enabling that stuff, and I think it's going to be massive to enable this stuff for end users.
Well, hopefully you go home today and take a look at Flow capabilities, and I'll take a look deeper into delegation framework, and maybe we can exchange thoughts.
Cool. We'll do. Great talking to you, Jeff.
Dan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.